of breaking news of the same story. One that ended with this: Antonio Brown signing with the New England Patriots, and then Instagramming this photoshopped image of him wearing his 84 jersey, and then reaction pouring in from around the league. From his new teammate first, Julian Edelman says 100, business is booming. So what will business look like once it is first able to boom? Unfortunately for those AB Patriots fans now, he will not be able to play against his former team in week 1 here tomorrow. But week 2, his hometown team, the Miami Dolphins, then he can say hello to Le'Veon Bell. And remember when he was briefly going to be a Buffalo Bill, per reports? That didn't happen, but he will have a chance to play them in week 4. Now we've got MJ Acosta, who's been covering this story all day in Alameda, as well as Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. Ian, let's start with you. This deal for Antonio Brown, take us through what the numbers look like.
Well, it is a 1-year deal worth up to $15 million, which, if that sounds pretty familiar, it's about what he was going to make with the Raiders this year had they not tried to void his guarantees, had they not told him he wouldn't get termination pay, had they not told him he was going to go week to week, leading Antonio Brown to say that without guarantees he was just not going to play and asking them to release him. So the Patriots essentially make Antonio Brown whole just over 1 season, and he does get a $9 million signing bonus. That is the guaranteed money that he sought. That's the guaranteed money that he got. And you mentioned he's not allowed to play tomorrow night against his old friend, the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the next week he is allowed to play. It'll be for the Patriots, and everything we have talked about over the last week has been absolutely crazy, and this seems like the sanest thing that's happened.
Ian, this accelerated really quickly, too. You go back to when the Raiders announced a little before noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, that they were releasing Antonio Brown after all the things that had happened over the previous 24 hours. Well, under a new NFL rule that was just approved back in March, teams could legally begin contacting Antonio Brown and his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, immediately. So roughly 4 hours later, it's a done deal with the Patriots, the 1-year deal worth up to $15 million that you mentioned. I talked to probably 20 NFL teams over the course of the morning about Antonio Brown, and there were all sorts of opinions, from he'll never play again to he's going to go someplace. But several people mentioned immediately the Patriots. It just makes too much sense. A team that needs a wide receiver, a team that feels it can fit its culture to virtually anyone. Well, if anybody's going to be a challenge culture-wise, it is Antonio Brown. The social media presence probably going to change just a bit once he gets to New England.
Well, and Tom and Ian, you mentioned speaking with people across the league saying he'd probably get picked up. That was sort of the sentiment here with a few players that I spoke to. They said, although they certainly wanted it to work out and keep Antonio Brown here in Oakland, they were confident that he would be picked up relatively quickly. I don't think a matter of hours was the time span they had in mind, but certainly knew with a talent like his that another team would come calling and come calling soon. Now, in terms of how the team is sort of pushing on through this, I think it's just the finality has set in, and there's relief now that they can completely focus on what's ahead of them, which is, of course, that primetime game on Monday to start of the season. So many of the guys I spoke to said it may be a big deal outside of these walls, and while it is disappointing to us, we've always remained focused. They've been a tight-knit group this entire time, and all of this has only brought the Raiders players closer.
Yeah, and so the players, and perhaps to a certain extent John Gruden, will be able to move on from this, Ian, but there is still the issue to resolve regarding Antonio Brown's guarantees and a potential grievance. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said earlier on Good Morning Football that he wasn't going to discuss it as it could be a potential legal issue. What can you tell us about the potential of a legal issue?
If that is going to be contested by agent Drew Rosenhaus and by Antonio Brown, it'll be handled by the NFLPA. That is what I'm told. No word yet on whether or not they're going to actually appeal and try to get his guarantees unvoided. But you have to wonder, guys, if him signing for a deal worth up to $15 million with the Patriots does take some of the sting away from the guaranteed money. And by the way, he also still has to pay the fines that the Raiders hit him with, $215,000 for punting the ball, yelling at Mayock and saying, "Fine me for that," plus $50,000+ for missing practice and a walkthrough with the Raiders. A lot of fine money that he still has to pay.
This is also another example of just how talent generally wins. Antonio Brown is a remarkably talented player. He's been highly productive in the NFL for a long time. But you think back just over the past 6 months, or really even going back 9 months to last December when he no-showed in Week 17. The Steelers couldn't find him. He ends up missing their season finale. A series of bizarre instances leading to him wedging his way out of Pittsburgh, gets traded for just a 3rd and 5th round pick to the Raiders, gets a raise, gets guaranteed money. That doesn't work out. Almost the exact same type of a sequence of events takes place. He wedges his way out of Oakland and then almost instantaneously lands with the Patriots. There are not a lot of wide receivers that can do what Antonio Brown can do. This will be a unique test for exactly how well the Patriots culture can adapt to a player like this. But there are some comparisons here to another former Raiders receiver who ended up in New England when Randy Moss went from there, from a different Raiders organization at that point, but went to New England, had one of the great seasons that we've seen in NFL history. The moment Moss exited New England that time, he went back into Minnesota. Within a month, he was telling the owners there that they should fire the head coach. Bill Belichick and his staff have a remarkable ability to work with different personalities and get the most out of just about everybody.
And Tom, you mentioned that X factor that Antonio brings, and that more than anything is exactly why the Raiders organization, the coaches, the front office, and the players themselves work so hard to try to make this work. The support that they put behind Antonio, especially on Friday when he came in and apologized, you could see just from the guys I spoke to in the locker room, even Coach Gruden, how excited they were, that they thought at that point, just yesterday actually, that this was going to work out. And then yet again, we had another mishap, and now, well, he's off to New England. So there's no denying the caliber of his play, but certainly, as Tahir Whitehead said earlier today, one of the captains of this team, when someone doesn't have a team-first mentality, it's never going to work.
And we'll see how it works in the future. We heard from John Gruden earlier today. He said that he wished Antonio Brown the best. It didn't take long. He found the defending Super Bowl champs. We'll see how that plays out. Thanks to MJ Acosta, Ian Rappaport, and Tom Pelissero with the latest on Antonio Brown going to the Patriots here on NFL Now, presented by Home Depot. Here's the Boston Herald cover. Patriots signed troubled 7-time Pro Bowl wide receiver Brown hours after being released by the Raiders. What a catch, the subhead there. Let's go to the phones. Our own Mike Giardi covers the New England Patriots for us here on NFL Network. He joins us now on the phones. Mike, they've had success with a whole lot of people. Here comes Antonio Brown.
Yeah, and I think the reason, Patrick, they've had success with some players of this ilk is because of that culture of accountability. It starts with Belichick, and I remember a story he told back in the day, and I think it's very pertinent to this situation. He said, beginning of his tenure with the Patriots, he's holding a meeting. Player walks in a couple minutes late, and the meeting's already going. And he sits fairly close to the front, and Belichick points at him and says, "What are you doing?" He said, "Sorry, coach. Sorry, I'm late." He said, "Get out. Get out. We're not allowing this to happen." And he said, that sort of, I think, has bridged for the last 20 years how he's approached the leadership and how he wants to set the tone for the team. And, they've had guys come in, whether it be Corey Dillon, Randy Moss. Those guys have worked. And then you can talk about Albert Hainsworth and Chad Ochocinco and Michael Floyd to a lesser degree, and the jury's still out on Josh Gordon. So they've had some hits and misses, but it's clear that they're willing to take a chance here because they believe strongly in Belichick's power, and I think just the overall leadership of that room.
And also, when you've had so much success, Mike, it's pretty easy to do what you want to do and know that not a lot of people are going to question you. As far as getting out on the field and the way that he fits, obviously would be a dream on the field, Antonio Brown working with Josh McDaniels, Tom Brady, and this Patriots offense.
Without question, because you sat there and said, and we've talked about it quite a bit here this summer, is what's the offense going to look like now that you've lost the best bailout option in the league in Rob Gronkowski? Well, adding someone of the talent level of Antonio Brown certainly can help to ease that problem. And, he's obviously the most, I think when you look at their receivers, the most explosive, the most versatile. Then you have Julian Edelman working the middle of the field. You have Gordon with his ability to work comebacks and slants and just overpower people with his size, so that if all those pieces fit and stay together, then you're talking about an offense that may not have nearly the problems and the growing pains that we thought they were going to all summer long.
Yeah, you compare it on paper to historical offenses, you have to go back to another Tom Brady offense that featured another guy who, at the time, was on a Hall of Fame track. That's our Mike Giardi reporting on the New England Patriots, joining us on the phone. Thanks, Mike. Reaction elsewhere in the league from non-Patriots. Also, a non-Raider, Jalen Ramsey, just with the crying, laughing emoji. This whole thing has been wild. Wild indeed. Our guy Max Starks was calling the Grambling State against Louisiana Tech game on NFL Network while all of this news was happening. Max, you were with AB early on in his career when he was the guy coming out of Miami, coming out of Central Michigan, just trying to earn a spot. Take us through how far things have come for him personally since 2010, 2011, and all the way until now, and your reaction to what's going on today.
Well, like you said, I saw AB as a young, hungry guy trying to make his way into the lineup of the receiving corps. When you come into a team that has a Hines Ward, that has Mike Wallace at the time, and even an Emmanuel Sanders as well, and those type of guys in front of you, and just work hard. He cut his teeth being a punt returner on this team and a kick returner, and then worked his way up into being the guy that we see today, one of the most electric players at the wide receiver position. You've seen the 100-plus catch season and the fast track that he was on in his time with Ben Roethlisberger, to now the upsetting news, and them not getting together at the end of last season, the Week 17 sit-out, which ultimately led for him to ask for his trade, and then the Raiders drama, and then now he ends up in a position, I think, better than when he left the Steelers in New England, the team that has the pedigree, that has the championship caliber personality. You look at the people that are on that team, and I think this is the last chance for AB, in my opinion, but he finally goes to a team that has more clout than he does personally, and I think that's what's going to help kind of curb the tide of that AB's been going through, because you have Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and if you can't listen to and you can't get along with those two guys, then nobody you're going to get along with. So I think it's a very big move, obviously something that we've watched firsthand. He's grabbed the headline since January, and I'm a little upset, just as personal, being a former Steeler, to see him kind of fail upwards towards New England. But I have to say, this New England squad, it changes the odds greatly for this team when you talk about the post-Rob Gronkowski era. Because think about this potential three-man lineup: Julian Edelman, him, and Demaryius Thomas or Philip Dorsett. There's so many receivers. It's going to be a different look for this New England team, and he's going to add that additional kind of caveat for this squad and what they can do offensively.
And Max, you talked about back in 2010, 2011, Antonio really different from the guy who became a perennial Pro Bowler, perennial star in the league, multiple-time All-Pro. Looking at the way he approaches things, kind of social media-wise, there was the locker room snafu years ago. Do you think that we're just seeing more AB now? He's just more willing to share who he is? Or you feel like he's a different person than he was when he was younger?
Well, I think we've seen this progression, because the one thing that has been constant with AB since he came into the NFL, work ethic. You can never knock the amount of after practice and it's showing up in the game time situations. But I think, like you said, as the notoriety has grown, as his presence has been known on the football field, so has his social media presence, and willing to share more or go beyond what the normal means are of access to Antonio Brown, the person, like you said, with this whole Snapchat/Facebook post in the locker room, to all of the things where he takes to social media to air his kind of stream of thought, so to speak. Very frontal lobe, like just get it out there. And that's where, it's a double-edged sword when you use social media, because it's such a delicate platform that can be used for good, or it can be very detrimental in a lot of situations. And good or bad, he's using that tool to the utmost ability.
And we will see. We've seen the reaction in the past hasn't been too great to his social media. Ultimately, the Patriots concerned with wins and losses. We'll see how he translates here in 2019. Max Starks, fresh off of our Conference USA call. Thanks for coming on, man.